Hello, how is everybody? Thank you for attending. I am assuming that many of you are here either because maybe you have somebody at home that is self-injuring, or you know somebody who's self-injuring, and you are an adult to somebody, that whatever. Self-injury is a very, very scary topic. And I am assuming that most of you think or assume that it is almost like kind of a gateway into suicide. I have a lot of parents who come to me and say, my child has started to self-harm, and that means that that is going to lead to a suicide. That is typically not the case. Not that it can't be the case. Typically not the case. So let's start by just kind of defining what is self-injury. And we're going to start with that because when research is done, there are so many different definitions of what self-injury is that it's hard to talk about research because every researcher gets to define what self-injury is. And so there are some common themes. And so something people do to harm themselves physically in the moment without intending to kill themselves. Deliberate with intention to alter bodily tissue without suicidal intent. Refers to the intentional destruction of body tissue, again, without suicide intent, for the purposes not socially sanctioned. That is an important piece there. Direct, deliberate destruction of one's own body tissue in the absence of suicide intent. Again, socially unaccepted behavior causing intentional and direct injury without suicidal intent. That is engaged to help regulate internal or interpersonal states. Individual repeatedly inflicts minor to moderate, often painful injuries to the surface of their body without suicidal intent. And again, do not want to invalidate the scariness of self-injury. She'll be 11 next month. And if I found out my 11-year-old were self-injuring, I would be scared to death. And I'm a therapist that works with self-injury. So some of the things that we see over and over again in the definitions is it is physical, it's immediate, it is intentional, it is without suicidal intent, and it's not socially sanctioned. So we're not talking about tattoos, we're not talking about body piercings, we are not talking about any kind of religious or cultural rituals. And you do hear about them, and you see them in some areas of the world where maybe there is some kind of cultural ritual that people go through. That is not what we are talking about. In the DSM-5, it has been revised. In the clinical world, this is kind of our Bible, and this is what we use to provide diagnoses. I wish we didn't have to use this, and it is something that has to be used for insurance. It is basically for insurance purposes. We have to give a diagnosis, so insurance will pay. It's interesting, as a clinician, I feel like I'm not qualified to diagnose, and we have to. If we want insurance to pay, we have to give people a diagnosis. There is a diagnosis in the new DSM-5, and it is although it is not an official diagnosis, in the DSM-5, and I don't remember what year it came out, there was a handful of new diagnoses that were put in there, that were put in as a condition for further study. And one of those diagnoses was non-suicidal self-injury disorder. So it is in the DSM-5, and it is not an official disorder. I included it in here just so you could kind of see how the DSM-5 categorizes it and what they say is the definition of non-suicidal self-injury. So within the last year, the individual has 5 or more days of intentional self-inflicted damage, likely to induce bleeding, bruising, or pain. Again, no suicidal intent. They engaged in self-injurious behavior with one or more of the following: to obtain relief from a negative feeling or a cognitive state, some kind of thinking, to resolve an interpersonal difficulty, or to induce a positive feeling state. It is the intentional self-injury is associated with at least one of the following: interpersonal difficulties or negative feelings, thoughts. Prior to engaging in the act, there was a period of preoccupation and thinking about self-injury that occurs frequently. There's an obsession almost with it. And the behavior is not socially sanctioned. It is not restricted to scab picking or nail biting. Thank goodness, because I would be probably their number one person. Scab picking in itself is a very interesting disorder, and there is a whole nother disorder for scab picking. The behaviors and consequences cause clinically significant distress and interfere with things, and the behavior does not occur during other disorders. And I'll talk about that here in a minute. So non-suicidal injury is NSSI. So the spectrum. There is a spectrum. There is major self-mutilation. I do not use the term self-mutilation. I use self-injury or self-harm. I think mutilation is really judgment-based. It sounds so severe. It sounds so, I don't know, it just sounds judgmental to me. That is just how this, when I got this information, that's how they termed it. But you see severe self-harm in a lot of people who are very psychotic. So you see people who may try to castrate themselves or take eyes out. I worked with a gentleman once who stabbed himself and had very severe abdominal damage while he was psychotic. I don't know if he thought there was something in him that he was trying to get out. That's not typical self-injury that we're talking about. There is stereotypical self-injury. This is something you see more in people who are cognitively challenged, people who may headbang, who may self-bite. These are people, again, more cognitively challenged individuals. And then you have moderate superficial self-harm. And this is what we see more in outpatient clinical world. Cutting, burning, they say picking here, punching, fractures, that kind of stuff is what we're talking about. So here we're looking at repetitive stuff, automatic. And when I say automatic, sometimes they don't even necessarily realize they're doing it. I had a client once, she called me and she said, all of a sudden I just noticed that I was in a closet at work and I was just scratching myself. She said, all of a sudden I just kind of dissociated and realized that I was scratching myself. It's without conscious intent or related to affect. That is that compulsive piece. And impulsive piece is, I need to feel better right now. It helps to regulate negative emotion. So we live in a world that immediate gratification is right now. How many of you, and I'm just as guilty, get frustrated when you go to frickin' McDonald's and they say, please pull up? It's fast food. Like, what do you mean pull up? And then I wait in the pull up thing for 10 minutes? Like, why isn't it ready? It's fast food. Especially if I ordered ahead on the app. Isn't that the whole purpose of ordering ahead? And then I have to wait? Like, sometimes fast food isn't even fast enough. Why do we have to wait, right? I did a presentation a few minutes ago for the teens, and we were talking about streaming. And when you stream, I said, how many people pay for streaming services where you don't have commercials? Most of them raise their hand. I said, why? Well, because we don't want to watch commercials. Exactly, because we don't want to wait. So we are all about immediate gratification. When I think about immediate gratification and not liking things, unfortunately, we have taught everybody, not only our children, but everybody, that we have good emotions and bad emotions. And they're just emotions. They're not good or bad, right? We have labeled them good or bad, but they're just emotions. And when we experience something we don't like guilt or shame, the first thing we do is, ooh, get rid of it. And when I think about an analogy for that, I think about baby food, and the first time you give your child baby food. And for me, it was when I gave my son green beans. He put it in his mouth, and he made a horrible little face, and he spit it out. And that's what we do with emotions. We take a bite, and we go, ooh, this doesn't taste good, get rid of it. And then we run away. And we're like, ooh, we don't like that. Stay away from that. That is bad. All right. And if you have ever seen the movie Inside Out, love the movie Inside Out. I've actually used it with many clients, especially depressed clients, because sadness has a purpose. And we need sadness. And at the end, they have to beg sadness to come out because they need her. So there's a purpose for her, even though we don't always like her, right? So some of the most common forms of non-suicidal self-injury is cutting, scraping, carving. People will carve words in legs, arms. That accounts for about 70%, 90%. Head banging, bruising, self-hitting, 21 to about 44%, and burning, about 15 to 35%. I have up there an eraser or a pencil. Even just the taking an eraser and just running erasers up and down arms is a form of self-injury, right? There are some gender differences. I think people think that self-injury is just a problem with girls. It is not. Boys tend to self-harm just as much, and in very similar ways. Girls tend to engage in more cutting behavior than boys. Males tend to punch more than girls. So if you have young men around boys, and they're coming to you and you are in the emergency room and the doctor says, oh, they have a boxer's fracture, that means they have hit something like this. And I worked in an emergency room when I was in grad school, and it's called a boxer's fracture, and I don't know exactly what is fractured, but it's typical when you hit something. And I don't know exactly what is fractured. And you may want to explore that a little bit more, what are we hitting? Males tend to engage in more self-battery, so hitting themselves. I worked with a gentleman once who had given himself 2 black eyes. And males tend to injure their hands more, and with their hands more, women more with their wrists and their thighs. So why? What are some of the functions? To feel better. It's a distraction, to express feelings, to release emotions and tension, to make things clearer, to make emotional pain clearer, more tangible, to self-punish. I deserve this. To end association. Some people, if there is a lot of trauma, may be dissociating, and sometimes they will self-injure as a way to end that. Sometimes they do it to get a rush or to feel a high, to feel something. And a lot of times it's a form of communication. So, why is it important that we even understand why they do it? Well, first of all, it decreases shame. And to know that lots of people self-injure. To understand and to increase self-acceptance. And to identify alternative behaviors. So, first of all, it helps regulate mood and affect. And there can be interpersonal functions. I may say, if you don't, I've seen this. I've seen this in therapy where I've had, if you don't give me back my phone, I'm going to cut myself. I have seen, I was so proud of this mom. Oh my gosh, I was so proud of her. Her daughter said to her, she was grounded for something. Daughter said, if you don't give me back my phone, I'm going to kill myself. And mom said, you're not getting the phone back. And daughter said, I'm going to kill myself. Mom said, you are not getting the phone back. And it was in our office. And that little 16-year-old got carted off to the hospital. And mom stood her ground and said, I'm not giving you back the phone. And I thought, good job, Mom. Because I'm not sure I could have done it, right? Good job, Mom. And, what would we have taught her? Great. Now all I have to say is I'm going to kill myself, and Mom's going to give me back my phone. Now, that's not always the answer, right? You can't keep doing that over and over and over and over and over again. It gets exhausting. And I've worked with so many parents who are exhausted. They're exhausted. And it's hard. okay? Understanding is the first step to acceptance, and only with acceptance can there be recovery. So why do people self-injure? We don't know. And the easy answer is that it helps them feel better. And we really don't know why. That's part of the problem. Is there serotonin release? Probably. Is there dopamine release? Probably. Does it help regulate? Yes. Not a huge Dr. Phil fan. And Dr. Phil says we only do what works. So we know it works. We just don't know why it works. We don't know why it works for some kids and not others. Some kids self-injure and they're like, yeah, that didn't work, and so I don't do it again. Some kids do it once and they're like, oh. I am fascinated with how people start to self-injure. Like, what was your first experience with self-injury? Like, I want to know. And part of it is I'm nosy, but part of it is I'm also like, how did you learn about this? How did you engage in this? And not so much with kids now, because I think self-injury is such a big topic now. People who are in their 30s and 40s, like back, if they started in like grade school and high school, that wasn't something that people did. So I'm like, I want to know, like, how did you stumble upon self-injury? And I have one client who said, I was doing dishes one day and I accidentally cut myself with a steak knife. And she went, oh. And I'm like, that's interesting to me. I have another client who said, I was shaving my legs and I cut myself with a razor. And she went, oh. That's kind of fascinating to me. Like, I don't know, any of you ladies in the room ever cut your, especially on the shin, and you're like, oh, right? And you're like, that doesn't feel so good. Like I can't even wrap my head around, like, oh, that's hard for me to understand, right? But the easy answer is it makes them feel better or changes to something different. If any of you have ever experienced chronic pain and somebody said, here, do this, it'll make you feel something different for a bit. I've had 3 back surgeries. My last back surgery, I was walking around my house because sitting hurt, standing hurt, laying down hurt, walking hurt, breathing hurt, but like walking was the one thing that hurt probably the least. So I was walking around my house crying. And if somebody would have said in that moment, hey Mary, if you cut your arm, it'll make you feel a different kind of pain, I may have said, let's try it. I don't know. I may have. Even if that pain was worse, it would have been a different pain. Because that pain was horrible pain. The other thing is, unless you've experienced a herniated disc in your back, and that pain that shoots down your leg and wraps around your ankle, you have no idea what that pain is like. And you can't see it. And if I would have come in here today with a cast on my arm, I bet somebody would have said, oh my gosh, what happened? What'd you do? Emotional pain you can't see, right? You can't see it. So people kind of get tired of like, nobody can see my pain. Nobody knows I'm in pain. I put on this happy little mask every day and pretend like things are great. And they're really not. But you can see this. Self-injury goes back long way. Long, long way. There are some fascinating books out there about self-injury. Goes back to biblical times. And so, there's all kinds of things. It wasn't that long ago that we used to use leeches to bleed out diseases. And so, you would go in and they'd put leeches on you and you'd bleed out diseases. It isn't uncommon still today for amputation. My dad died 8 years ago in November. He had an infection that started in his leg. And they're like, if we amputate his leg, there is a chance that we can catch the infection before it moves into the rest of his body, and we could save his life. So my mom and I said, oh, okay. And unfortunately, we were not able to save him, but we amputated his leg to try and save his life. So, that is still a common practice. All kinds of behavior usually is trying to communicate something. 2-year-olds throw fits because they're trying to communicate to you. Our teens are whatever, even myself, right? All behavior tries to communicate something. And self-injury does the same. When I could not find the words to describe it, cutting had become the language to describe the pain, communicating everything I felt. I have a client, she is in her mid to late 30s. She said, the words I need to describe what I'm feeling have not been invented yet. People who cut themselves do it as an outlet for interpersonal conflict and mental anguish. It is a mental dissociation and the body speaking its mind. And while it is easily mistaken for suicide, the sufferers often make a plea for living on their own terms. In other words, as in eating disorders, we see people crossing frontiers and borders, and we can read their bodies like passports, being imprints of their travels and travails. Scars tell stories. Why do people get tattoos? I got my first tattoo a year ago. Right? It tells a story. It tells a story that I can't put into words. It represents my mom and dad who are both gone. It tells a story, right? Somebody asks me about it, and I get to tell them a story. It communicates. It's self-expression, right? Myths. It is not usually a suicide attempt. It is not a gateway to suicide. A myth is that it's superficial and not dangerous. Don't think, oh, my kid is just, it's just self-injury and I shouldn't take it seriously. No, it is self-injury and take it seriously, right? Not just oh, it's nothing. I don't ever want to have a parent say, it's nothing. Like you want to take it seriously. Myth, it is manipulative and it is attention seeking. I have such a problem when I hear therapists say it is just attention seeking. When I hear therapists say that, I want to jump over tables. It may be, okay? I'm not saying that it can't be. And I never want to ever hear anybody say about anybody that a behavior is attention seeking without checking through every other reason why somebody is doing something. It might be attention seeking, very well could be. And let's go through everything else first. And then we can maybe say it's attention seeking. Never, ever, 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 ever just assume that it's attention seeking without looking into something else first. Self-injury does not equal borderline personality disorder. I think borderline personality disorder is the stupidest diagnosis in the whole entire world. If I were a parent and somebody wanted to give my child that diagnosis, I would fight them tooth and nail until the bitter end. That is the last diagnosis I'd ever want on my child's record, ever. When I started in the field, and the reason I actually even went down this whole path and found myself working with people who self-injure is I had a client who had the diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. I was out of grad school for 2 years, and I'm like, I graduated from grad school. Yeah. And I get this client, and I had no idea what I was doing. And the only thing I knew about working with people with borderline personality disorder is that I didn't want to do it. Because everybody says, oh, you don't want to work with borderlines. They're manipulative. They are difficult. They are going to get you sued. And they have a whole bunch of reasons. And they said, you steer clear of borderline personality disorders. You do whatever you can do to not work with that population. Okay, but here I have one. And she was really likable. And she was a person, a real person, and had real problems. And I thought, she deserves my help. And she's really struggling. And I don't know what to do with her. And I'm not being effective. And I went to our consulting psychiatrist at the time. And I said, Dr. John, I don't know what to do. And he said, have you ever considered that maybe this is as good as she gets? And I'm like, yeah, no. No. There's got to be more. We've got to do better. She cannot live her life going in and out of the hospital. What kind of life is that? No. And I continued to kind of do my best. And thank goodness, DBT was just kind of dropped in my lap, which is the treatment of choice for borderline personality disorder, which is kind of the treatment of choice for people who self-injure. It has become a very evidence-based treatment for eating disorders and substance abuse, and even working with kids and families. And it if anybody ever wants to put borderline personality disorder on, if you have children, fight that. Fight it, fight it, fight it. And do not ever let them do that before your child is 18. Even though they can, do not let them do that. Self-injury is only a female problem. Again, myth. Self-injury is crazy, sick, irrational. It's very rational. to the person doing it, it makes complete sense to them. Another myth is that they must resolve all of their underlying issues before you can stop it, right? And if you resolve all of your underlying issues, your self-injury will stop. Not necessarily. Again, a myth. So, DBT, just mentioned that. DBT was developed by Dr. Marsha Linehan. She was out in Seattle. She herself has her own mental health issue. She actually started her work here in Chicago. She was out in Seattle. She retired a couple years ago. She spent 26 months in a state hospital at one time. She engaged in her own self-injury. Most of that 26 months, she was in isolation, and she would headbang. Because in isolation, that was the only thing she could do. She started working with people, with women who were chronically suicidal. What she found is that most of them actually met criteria for borderline personality disorder. It is a form of CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And it is very, very, very evidence-based, very well researched. Like I said, they have expanded it to lots of different populations. It's great. So dialects is all about this idea of opposites. Sometimes, especially teens, start to think in black and white, right or wrong, all or nothing, good or bad. And dialects is this whole idea about holding two opposites at the same time. So, for example, I can think I'm pretty and ugly at the same time. I can think I'm pretty, and I can look at myself in the mirror and go, I really look ugly in this dress. And I still think I'm pretty. It doesn't have to be one or the other, okay? But sometimes our teens say, look at me, I'm ugly. This dress looks ugly on me. I'm ugly. I'm just ugly. They can't step and go, and I'm pretty. This dress just doesn't work for me, right? They can't see that. It's one or the other. My partner broke up with me, so that means I'm unlovable. And I'm also lovable, right? They have a hard time with that balance. So the biggest balance and the biggest dialect in the therapy itself is this idea of acceptance and change. That they accept themselves just the way they are, and that we promote change. That you are okay just the way you are. And we need to change some things. So treatment modes, I apologize that lighting is not great in here, but there are 4 pieces to DBT. The first is just individual therapy, that everybody is in individual therapy. That is kind of their primary therapist. They're working through all of their stuff in individual. In regular standard DBT, they are also in group therapy. And group therapy is not your regular group therapy, like come and discuss your feelings. Group is group skills training. So it is more classroom setting. It is didactic. You are teaching the skills. I think it's really important that it happens in a group setting because you learn from other people. And you go, hey, you've done this, and how did that work for you? You're like, you know what, I adapted it, and I did it this way. And you're like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense to me. But if you're doing it one-on-one, you take up so much individual therapy time that it's hard to do any kind of other stuff. There's also phone consultation. So clients actually have access to you And what I talk about here is even Michael Jordan had a coach. So there were times out on the court when Michael Jackson would call timeout, and he'd go over and he'd talk to Phil, and he'd say, "Hey, Phil, what do you think?" Right? Even Michael Jordan, who has, like, LeBron James beat, like, you and I can get into a discussion about Michael and LeBron, but, like, Michael wins. Even Michael Jordan had a coach. And then team consultation. Team consultation is for the therapists themselves. And that is so the therapist stay doing the treatment. Skills they teach, mindfulness, all about just being in the moment. It is not necessarily meditation, although meditation can be mindfulness. It's all about just teaching people to be in the moment. Not living in the past, not living in the future, not worried about college, right? Just being in the moment. Distress tolerance is my favorite skill ever because we use it all the time. We get into our car, the car doesn't start, and we're like, crap. I am supposed to be at work, and now I got to figure it out. What do I do? I'm late for work, and now I got stuck behind a train. What do I do? Emotion regulation is all about regulating. So we all live in, I'm guessing, some type of home, apartment. We've been in some place where we have to regulate temperature. So you either go and you either turn up or you turn down. Most of people I work have to learn to turn down emotions. And so teaching people how to do that. The last skill is interpersonal effectiveness. And it's just teaching people how to be effective. And the one thing I stress there is this idea of being right versus being effective. I like being right. Like all things being equal, I want to be right. I like being right. And I like proving to people that I'm right, but it's not always effective to prove that I'm right. Ask my husband. And then here are just some resources. I'm with Grow Wellness Group. DBTselfhelp.com has tons of handouts. The DBT, Marsha Linehan, there is DBT certified therapists out there. There are a couple that don't mean anything. That, like, if you take their class, they'll certify you. So if you really, really want somebody that you know knows what they're doing, look for a Linehan board certified therapist. And if you go to the dbt-lbc.org, that is a Linehan board certified. And then here is Behavioral Tech Institute is Dr. Linehan's webpage. They are out in Seattle. You can find all kinds of resources. So if you're looking for somebody who specializes in eating disorders or substance abuse, family work, whatever, they can help direct you. So that is all I have.